What's up, everybody? Alright, we got another list of things to go over and troubleshoot for different groups of rifles. One moment, please. My headset is deciding to tangle. Alright, so let's go down the list, and then I have some guns on backup to show and recognize examples. I'm going to have to change it, but we'll fix it when we get there. Alright, so what's the first thing you must do before attempting to disassemble or inspect any sort of firearm? Obviously, clear it. Basic things of running down, attempt to put that weapon in a safe condition, remove that ammunition source, may that be a detachable or internal fixed magazine, whichever the weapon may be. You will remove those sources of ammunition, you will open that action, visually and physically inspect. That means you will take that booger hook of yours and make sure that there is nothing hiding inside that chamber. Alright, making sure that you have positive control of the weapon at the entire time, and also it is pointing in a safe direction. In a gas operated system, how does the rotating bolt operation work? And what is one firearm that uses the rotating bolt locking system? Well, luckily, if we go right here, boom, I have the M4. I have it doctored up similar to what I worked with when I was in. Now, if we go into here to where it actually shows us the bolt, and then we slow her down a good bit, and then we are going to fire. So that hammer is going to get released with the trigger pull. It's going to bop that down, and it's going to ignite that round. Oh, let me pause it. Oh, I almost missed it there, everybody. So what is going on there is that bullet's going off. Boom, doo. It's coming through that gas port. It's doubling back. It's hitting that gas key, and forcing that bolt to go rearwards. While that is going rearwards, it is indexing on the opposing side of the weapon by the bolt cam pin. Bolt cam pin is going to turn and actuate inside, which is going to rotate that bolt. As we see here, it is allowing that bolt to rotate, so it's in the lock position, rotation, unlock, and then it will free it up and allow it to move, so then it can extract and inject those rounds. And then it's going to go forward. Alright, it's going to hit its stopping point, and then it's going to begin to cam, and now it's locked and it's ready to go boom again. Awesome. Now for the SKS, let's go over. So we're going to go to pause, we're going to go to exit, and we're going to go to yes, and then we're going to go to catalog, and we are going to scroll down to the S's. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, and we have the, hold on, where'd it go? Where is she? Oh, come on. There it is. SKS. Alright. Boom. And we're going to go to operate, have it open up, let it load. Awesome, cool, we're here. Alright, now, the SKS is an example of a falling, tilting, breech block operation in a gas operated system. How does this work, and what are some of its strengths in the design? So, let's slow her down a good bit, and then let's give her some x-ray properties. Alright. Let's use our magical ninja eye status to see what's going on here. Alright, let's see if we can get it to where we can actually see what's going on with that bolt. Oh, a little too much. Alright, so let's fire her. And watch. So that trigger is pulling. Pressing that spring, forcing that hammer up. Popping that firing pin. Ooh, what just happened there? Let's see, everybody. Alright, so that hammer is flying forward. Hits that firing pin. Right, so that buildup of energy is allowing that bolt to slide back with this whole recoil assembly that is being propelled by this piston. While that is going back, it is indexing on the actual bolt face. So it is untilting, brings it back, allows it to eject. Let's take a look at what kind of ejection we got going on here. So let's back her up a slight bit. Alright, so it looks as we have a internal fixed ejector on the SKS as well. And then she's going to go forward. Let's go back to where we were when we x-rayed. And then she's going to slide up and go back into battery. So, from what I see of the strengths and weaknesses is, so for the strength of it, it is a very simplistic design. And obviously, if you look at the time and credit for the SKS, it's right before the idea of a standard issue carbine, self-loading, semi-automatic rifles started to be a lot more a lot more popular. That's when you started to see the Gewehr design to be a lot more prominent in Germany. That's around the time of the full swing of the M1 being like, hey, the ability for someone to not fiddle with the gun after every shot is starting to be a lot more of a reasonable design. Let's plunge into this. That's when we start seeing the Russians start messing with SKS and SVD designs. And then a lot of other people were starting to play around with self-canting bolt designs, such as for the Lee Enfield for the British. They had like even in the First World War, they had a weird gas thing that somehow just manually operated the bolt. So it was still bolt action. It just had an attachment that operated off of a gas system instead of just coming up with something a little bit more superfluous, or just being like, hey, let's just take the contract of the M1 and move it over, or the SKS. Strengths with this is you have a bolt assembly that's able to lock itself out of random spontaneous mishaps. It's strengthened due to the fact of it just being a block of steel in a position that it doesn't want to move. Alright. It's also preventative of having runaway operations, such as if there is damage to the actual the piston. Let me go to the name so I'm actually calling everything right. The piston, the pusher spring, and the actual pusher. This entire assembly is actually able to, if it is damaged, you don't have a runaway gun popping off 7.62 like crazy. If we go back, you actually have a very simplistic magazine design that actually is well ahead of its time when it came to internal box magazines. And it doesn't surprise me that you actually see the trench bay design of the SKS fit with a well-stable cartridge. Very simplistic in a trigger design, which you can see today that people are still tinkering with it to actually be even better, and they're still rocking with general standards. The hammer, I can see a fault in the hammer for it being generally thinner there, but it works, and it's a sturdy weapon, and it shows for the fact of itself. The recoil spring, I believe that this portion could have been a lot more modified, especially with modern technology, if they wanted to come up with a newer version of the SKS platform. Even though there's generally no need for a full-size service battle rifle anymore. Everybody's kind of swapping over to assault rifles and carbines for military aspect. And yeah, and it operates off of legit it ejects off of just a slight groove put into the receiver, so that's less of a fight of an ejector problem, and it's a lot more easier to diagnose because most likely it would just be an ammunition issue or just something's wrong with the bolt face. Let's see what the next question is. How does direct gas impingement operations differ from a piston-driven operation system? So, good thing we have the SKS in front of us. So if we back her up all the way over here and slowly move it forward to where the hammer strikes. Alright, so inside that round, I'm going to say this 1,000 times more, 3 major things. You have your projectile, your propellant, and your ability of percussion, which would be the primer and the base of that round. So that firing pin strikes that primer, set of a pressure-based explosive that goes off, that ignites the gunpowder in the round. That buildup of gas and energy expels. So, after a while of people being, hey, there's a lot of energy here that we can use to have other stuff in the gun to operate. So for the SKS, that round proceeds down the barrel. And where you're going to see commonly with a lot of weapons that would be semi-auto or fully automatic that operate off of gas instead of inertia or direct recoil or anything else under the sun, if it runs directly off of the spent gas, you're going to see a gas system. So For the SKS, you see this small slide tube. It's going to take some of that gas into this piston, or this piston cylinder, and it's going to build up and propel the piston rearwards. Well, that propels rearwards, that essentially is going to just smack straight into the top of the bolt. If we dumb down this portion, smack, pushes that back. All of that general inertia and energy is forcing the actual bolt, charging handle assembly, and everything to just go straight rearwards until this spring, the recoil spring, is condensed enough to where it's just like, all right, I'm getting sick and tired of being squeezed here. I'm gonna push back. That's gonna proceed to push back, and then on its return, it's gonna pick up that next round in that magazine and bring her home. All right. Now, for gas operated systems, let me swing back over to an M16 or an M4. So let me scroll up a little bit. Here we go, M16. Go back to operations, let it load. Go over to this one. All right, perfect actually. All right, let me slow her down. And let's shoot her. Alright, so let me go to where the bullet starts flying. Alright, so what's going on here is that hammer is propelling forward, striking that firing pin, which is then denting that primer of that 223. Now, as the projectile flies down the good old barrel, you're going to see that there is a similar thing going on here with this gas port. This gas port is going to direct the gas down the gas tube, down, 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 and it's going to encounter the gas key. So, from the, oh, I clicked the wrong one, my apologies. It's going to encounter that bolt carrier gas key, all right? That is a receptacle to operate off of that gas. Well, while that gas is pushing rearwards on it, it's going to take that bolt with it. So, as I was saying with that bolt cam pin, it's going to turn and unlock it. There's another angle of that example. That's going to bring it back. That bolt carrier group is going to compress the spring on the buffer and buffer spring inside the buffer tube. While that's going on, that spring is going to get condensed and it's going to be like, nope, I'm going to push you back. Well, that turns and comes back. That's going to pick up that next round in that magazine as it is cocking the hammer to prepare for that next round to be fired. And it's going to be chambered and locked. Next question, please. What is the difference between a dynamic and fixed ejector? So, for the SKS, we experienced a fixed ejector. And essentially, it's going to be an object that would obstruct the path of that casing inside the weapon's operating system. So, for the SKS, that slight bump that was sitting inside the receiver is the obstruction to that brass casing. As that bolt is going back and it's flying back and essentially gets shoulder checked by what would be that fixed ejector. Now, that dynamic ejector is going to be something that's going to operate off of a few more complex parts, such as the Daygum bolt hidden extractor. Let's see if I can zoom her back to, here we go. Perfect. So, the ejector itself, inside there is going to be a small rod that is constantly under compression, and then it's going to be under compression by a spring that's behind that, okay? So, as that round is attached behind that extractor, behind the rim of the actual bolt itself, it is compressing that extractor pin, which is squeezing down on that extractor spring that is constantly going to be pushing. Well, inside the uncontrolled action of an AR bolt, it is constantly going to be under a pressure or being opposed its force. So, as if we go back here, we see how it wants to fling. All right. Well, since it sits from its point of being chambered to the point until it needs to extract, it is being controlled in a way. May that be by the weapon's chamber or breach. May that be by if you accidentally messed up or you have something wrong with your weapon. May that just be another round flipped up in there. Or you physically holding your bolt and with a dummy cartridge understanding where this is going. You'll see that it is constantly forcing it forward. Next question. Alright, so summarize the difference between gas operated and blowback. So, for a blowback operating system, it is running off of the energy of that cartridge being propelled backwards as it is sending the projectile forward. Now, for a gas operated system, it is using the expanding gases from that the expulsion of the cartridge to then power and operate a system within the weapon to then cycle the action. Alright, so customer brings in his AR-15/AR-10 platform, alright, Arma light rifle, and it explains that it does not eject the spent brass and states that the bolt doesn't pull the brass from the chamber, but it gets stuck before leaving the ejection port. Alright, please read the instruction at the top of the assignment to understand what is included in this section. So I'm going to pause that and read that. Alright, so let's just go down this list. Safety procedures. So for a AR platform, may that be an AR-10, AR-15, someone's lucky enough to pick up a pre-ban M16 or what have you, similar systems. Attempt to put the weapon on safe. Remove that magazine, charge the bolt to the rear, lock that bolt, visually and physically inspect the chamber. Turn the bolt, make sure you are visually watching that bolt close so it doesn't pick up that magic round. Alright? Put the weapon on safe. State the weapon if it's a rotating bolt. Alright? It is direct gas. And it is not piston driven. There are piston driven ARs. And then any procedures to proceed with the following to eliminate the user's area of ammunition and such. Alright, cool. So let's go down and reread. So the customer comes in and he brings in his AR and explains that it does not eject the spent brass and states that the bolt doesn't pull the brass from the chamber and it gets stuck before leaving the ejection port. So from what I can infer from the text provided is within, let me bring this back so I can actually point this out a little bit more. Alright, so within here, the whole process that we just watched as I was fast forwarding doesn't happen. So that brass is sitting inside there, or it's just lingering. So as I was saying, it is a uncontrolled feeding system. So what it does is all it does is just shove that round straight into the chamber, as we see, straight off of the magazine, and doesn't have any control until that round is chambered. So let's see what parts of this system actually have control of that round inside there, so then we can troubleshoot onwards. So as we see here is that extractor is the part that actually aids in the removal of that cartridge in the extraction process in the cycle of operations. Alright, so we could have a faulty extractor spring, or the extractor might be worn or broken down. Otherwise, if he's able to operate it and he can somehow manually use it, that most likely is done to worn or messed up parts. Alright, now let's see what else is on there. Alright, alright, let me scroll up. Parts that could have caused this malfunction, most likely a worn or damaged extractor. In summary, the parts replacements and cost to the URL were such as parts as products. Please identify one of the suspected components of the malfunction and shop complete online. So what I'm going to do is in post, I'm going to go into the comment section and post a link of the cost of an extractor to one of the provider websites. So, we replace the extractor. What steps do we do to address this malfunction? All right, so they come to me. The first thing I'm going to do is obviously clear the weapon. But in my time of diagnosing and creating a cure for this gun sickness or problem, what have you, I'm having fun here, is I'm going to load 2 or 3 rounds of dummy ammo, all right? And then I'm going to attempt to manually cycle the action so I personally can see and acknowledge this is the problem, all right? Now, after I diagnose the problems as a broken extractor, which let's say it is, i.e., I'm going to replace that extractor with a new one, all right? And then I am going to do the same process with the dummy ammunition again. If I am experiencing none of those problems and everything is operating perfectly, I have ensured that the weapon is still properly head-spaced and timed and is working good and safe, I am going to load I'm going to load live ammunition and test fire the weapon to ensure that it is properly ejected. All right. If that solved the issue, awesome. What is my reference materials on my account? It is going to be the U.S. Marine Corps TM on the M16 and AR platform, or M16 M4 platforms. All right. Now, for number 3, awesome. Did I just skip number 2? Nope. All right, we already did that. All right, so customer brings in his AK platform and states that he has had the rifle forever and never had any problems with it. Now it just won't fire. Push the round into the chamber, no problem. Pulls the trigger, and here's a click. Nothing happens. By performing a test fire, you confirm that it is failure to fire. You can hear the hammer strike and discover that the primer is not dented. Dented on the round, you attempt to fire. Please be sure to read the instructions at the top of the assignment to understand what's going on. Alright, so I'm going to reread this again to make sure that it is properly iterated and everybody here can understand, so that way in the comment sections you guys can tell me what I did wrong. Customer brings in his AK platform and states that he has had the rifle forever. Alright, so we have a aged weapon. I'm assuming he bought it new and he's just ran it home like every other normal AK. Alright, and never had any problems with it, as most AKs. Alright, now it just won't fire. It pushes around in the chamber. Alright, cool, recoil spring and everything's operational. Alright, he has no problems with but when he pulls the trigger, he hears a click and nothing happens. Alright, so now it comes to us. After we cleared the weapon, we are now running our physical test to replicate the customer's problems to see if it's them making the mistake or if it's actually the gun doing something that the gun is not supposed to be doing. By performing a test fire, you confirm that it is a failure to fire. You can hear the hammer strike the primer, all right? And we notice that the primer is dented, all right? So we have, it is not dented. So we have a conflict between the firing pin denting the primer. All right, so we have discovered our problem area. So what we're gonna do here, so I can visualize instead of just trying to use my magical imagination powers, we're gonna go over here, I'm gonna back this up, and we're gonna scroll all the way up to the top to the AKs. All right, I'm gonna go to operate. I am using World of Guns, gun disassembly. I'm experiencing comments of people asking me this. You can also get it on your phones. All right, so we're gonna go here. All right, we're gonna go into X-ray of the firing mechanism. What's this one? Actually, let's go with this. All right, we're gonna slow her down. All right, and then we are going to fire it and see what goes on. So that trigger gets pulled. All right, disconnects off of there. All right, disconnects off of the disconnector and brings that hammer up. Alright, so let's go in and take a closer look on what in the world is going on here. So, we have our safety selector. Alright, weapons and safe, all that does is just stop that trigger from being pulled. Alright, so, trigger's being pulled. Alright, frees up space on that hammer. The hammer goes forward because it's being brought by that main hammer spring. Alright, it's going to come up, boop, it's going to hit that firing pin. That firing pin's going to go forward. Alright, hold on, let me get an angle to where the extractor and everything's out of the way. Alright, it's going to nudge that firing forward. And it's going to come back through that piston system that we talked about earlier. Very similar to the SKS, but the AK went slightly different because it's a different weapon. Alright, swing that back. Alright, so bring it back, rotate that bolt, and come forward. Alright, so we have completely bypassed our problem area here. So, areas that may lead to the problems with this weapon for failure to fire. So we are having confirmed hammer drops without denting of the primer. Possible problems: we have a damaged hammer spring. One portion of the hammer spring may not be connected and not allowing enough oomph. Maybe it's worn. Alright, we can always test that. Also, another thing to look at would actually be the weapon's firing pin. Make sure it's not dented, damaged, bent. Ensure that it's there. That could be something different. Maybe the owner of the weapon was cleaning and bringing it back together and just happened to not put the firing pin in. Happens more times than you would believe. Alright. We could have a missized firing pin, retaining pin. But besides that, those three parts would most likely be our problem children. Alright. So, we have discovered that. Now, for clearing of the AK. Let's just go down the list again since we've went in the wrong order. Alright, safety procedures. Remove the source of ammunition. Attempt to put the weapon on safe. Charge the weapon, visually and physically inspect to ensure that there is no rounds, debris, or any gunk inside the chamber. After that, slowly return the bolt home. Make sure that you are visually watching that bolt close so it doesn't pick up those magical rounds that show up. Alright, safe the weapon. It is a rotating bolt, and it is piston driven or piston operated. Alright, any procedures to follow eliminate user error. We already went through and remedied that. We replicate those problems, or we attempt to replicate the problems. If we notice to the factor that the weapon is not doing it, it is most likely 9 times out of the 10 the customer. This is why you commonly would ask the customer, hey, how would you do that? Mike, hi, can you please get out of the way? I'm teaching a class. Awesome, cool. Then parts that could cause the failure if it is mechanical. Alright, we already went through. It would be the firing pin, or those main hammer springs, or that firing pin retaining pin. Could be wonky, could be missized, or could be bent, preventing the full travel of that firing pin. In summary, I'm going to place the parts into the comment section and also send privately to my instructor. Alright. What steps could I do after addressing the problem? Alright, I'm going to take a magazine loaded up with several dummy rounds, manually cycle the action to make sure that there's no other remedies, and then attempt to fire the weapon. Alright, if the weapon does fire and it's properly cycling, cool, awesome, we did a good job. If it doesn't, I messed up somewhere, and I got to take some self-evaluation to figure out what's wrong with this weapon, what materials. Alright, so the materials I use is the Marine Corps Technical Manual for the AK platform. So hold on to make sure if there's anything else. Awesome. Thank you for coming around. Hope you guys are enjoying this content. And as always, treat every weapon as if we're loaded. Never point your weapon at anything not intended to shoot. Keep your finger straight off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Keep your weapon on safe and intend to fire. Know your target will lies beyond and in between. Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone. Goodbye.
Welcome to Dan Doc's channel. channel.